You ever have one of those mornings so perfect it feels like the universe is finally cutting you a break? Birds chirping in surround sound, the lake a glassy mirror, and coffee so good it makes you forget your email inbox exists. Yeah, I was having that kind of morning. And then Karen showed up. I'm Jake, 34, website designer by day, lakeside hermit by every other available moment. 3 years ago, I inherited my grandfather's cabin on Pine Lake, a weathered, slightly crooked slice of heaven that smells like cedar, fish guts, and freedom. The old man bought the place back in 1962 for what now wouldn't even get you a parking space downtown. Back when land was cheap and neighbors still believed in minding their own damn business. On that particular July Saturday, I was in my element. It was just after 7 in the morning, early enough that the world hadn't realized I existed yet. I was perched on my rickety wooden dock, bare feet dangling over the edge, coffee in one hand and a fishing rod in the other. The lake was so still, it looked fake. Birds were gossiping in the pine trees like old ladies on bingo night, and a gentle mist curled across the surface like a lazy ghost. Then it happened. The sound. A noise so offensive, so aggressive, so artificial that it ripped through the morning calm like a chainsaw in a monastery. Put. The guttural stuttering of a badly maintained pontoon boat engine approached from the far end of the lake. You know the type of noise that makes your eye twitch involuntarily? Yeah, that. And then she emerged, like a Disney villain on water. The woman behind the wheel looked like someone had extracted the concept of entitled from the dictionary, dressed it in a hot pink visor, and given it a megaphone. Late 50s, bleach blonde hair and a hairsprayed helmet. Giant sunglasses that probably cost more than my kayak. And of course, the piece de resistance, a clipboard. Not just any clipboard. This one looked like it had seen battles. Corners reinforced with duct tape, laminated pages fluttering in the breeze, and a pin on a lanyard dangling like a weapon. The boat cut across the lake like it was on a mission from God, or at least from someone who thought they were. It turned and headed straight for my dock like it had a homing beacon for joy. "Excuse me," she bellowed before she was even within spitting distance. Her voice had the kind of shrill authority usually reserved for middle school principals and DMV managers. "You can't fish here." I blinked, not entirely sure I'd heard that correctly. I looked around, still just me, my coffee, my dock, and my property. "I'm sorry, what now?" I called back, trying not to laugh. Or choke. She was closer now, pulling up to my dock like she owned the place. Which, spoiler alert, she absolutely did not. "This is a private lake," she declared, cutting the engine with the smug satisfaction of someone who thinks they just performed a mic drop. "Residents only." Now, in this moment, a lesser man might have tried to reason with her. Maybe explain the very obvious fact that I was sitting on a dock attached to a cabin that I own. But you see, I've worked in customer service. I've built websites for companies that make Satan look like a guidance counselor. I can spot a Karen from 100 yards out, especially when she's dressed like she's about to host a bake sale for fascism. So instead, I took a slow sip of my coffee. "Interesting," I said, like I was just told aliens had landed, but only in New Jersey. "And you are?" She straightened her shoulders like she'd been waiting her whole life for this question. "Karen Hutchinson," she announced, with the kind of pride you normally only see in Olympic gold medalists and people who've just finished a 5,000-piece puzzle of a cat. "President of the Pine Lake Homeowners Association." Oh, there it was. She whipped up the clipboard like she was holding the 10 Commandments. "And you, sir, are trespassing." I smiled. Not a big one, just a tiny curl of the lip. The kind of smile you give right before you serve someone a dish called, "You really should have done your homework." "HOA, huh?" I said, setting my coffee down with theatrical care. "Tell me more about this residents-only policy of yours." Karen lit up like she was about to win Jeopardy. She flipped a laminated sheet to the front. Because of course it was laminated. "Section 4.2 of the Pine Lake Residential Community Rules and Regulations," she said. And yes, she absolutely said it like it was a federal statute. "Lake access is strictly prohibited for non-residents. Fishing, swimming, or any recreational activity is reserved exclusively for homeowners who pay monthly HOA dues." She looked at me with the self-satisfaction of someone who just found a parking ticket on someone else's windshield and decided justice had been served. That means you, sir, she added, need to pack up your little fishing trip and find somewhere else to play. Oh, honey. See, the thing about dealing with a Karen is that logic isn't going to work. You have to let them think they're in control, right up until the moment they realize they never were. And these dues, I said, slowly reeling in my line. How much are they exactly? $45 a month, plus occasional special assessments for lake maintenance and community improvements, she rattled off. Like this was a perfectly normal thing to say to a stranger on his own dock. We've invested thousands into keeping this lake pristine. I stood up and stretched, giving her a nice long look at the property behind me. The cabin, the old metal canoe tied to the post, the mailbox with my name literally carved into it. Thousands, I repeated. That's impressive for a lake that doesn't actually have an HOA. Karen blinked. Twice. What do you mean? She asked, suspicion and fear starting to war for space on her face. I mean, Karen, that Pine Lake is a natural body of water. And more importantly, I let the words hang in the air, slow and deliberate. I own it. The silence was immediate and glorious. Karen's mouth opened and closed like someone had unplugged her firmware. Her clipboard dipped a little, like even it was too embarrassed to be part of this interaction. That's impossible, she managed to choke out. You can't own a lake. Oh, but you can. It's called riparian rights, combined with a little thing called a historical property deed. My grandfather purchased this land, including the lake bottom and water rights, in 1962. I've got the documents, the surveys, and 6 decades of tax records to prove it. Karen's perfect veneer cracked like a cheap nail under pressure. But we have an HOA, she spluttered. We have rules. I smiled. Yes, you do. And I'm sure the 15 other homeowners you've hoodwinked appreciate your enthusiasm. But here's the thing about rules, Karen. They only work when you actually have the authority to make them. She stared at me, horror blooming behind her oversized sunglasses. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. This was far from over. Karen had just poked the wrong bear, and I was about to enjoy every second of what came next. Karen's brain was visibly buffering. You could almost hear the Microsoft error chime echoing in the hollow spaces behind those oversized sunglasses. Her jaw clenched. Her clipboard drooped slightly, like even it was embarrassed to be seen with her. I don't believe you, she said finally, like this was a debate and not a reality. Oh, sweet Karen. That was mistake number 1. See, the thing about truth is, it doesn't care if you believe in it. It's not Santa Claus. It doesn't need your faith. It needs receipts. And oh, I had receipts. But I wasn't going to give them to her just yet. You don't bring out the fireworks at the beginning of the show. You let the audience stew a little. You let the tension simmer. So, I said, taking another slow sip of coffee like this was just a lazy brunch date and not the prelude to a legal Armageddon. About this HOA of yours. Karen, perhaps sensing the ground beneath her platform sandals was not as firm as she'd thought, straightened her spine. Pine Lake Residential Community has had a homeowners association since 1999, she said, voice shifting into lecture mode. I've been the acting president for the last 6 years. Elected? I asked innocently. Appointed by majority vote, she said, a little too quickly. Translation. She printed her own title and dared anyone to challenge her. She yanked a laminated sheet from her clipboard like she was pulling a sword from a stone. These are our community guidelines. We have strict rules in place to protect the serenity and safety of this lake. Unauthorized usage disrupts that balance. Balance, I repeated, looking around at nothing. No party boats. No jet skis. Just a loon calling somewhere in the distance, and me, the terrifying invader, sipping Colombian roast and fishing for trout. Karen waved the sheet at me like it was a subpoena. This lake has been maintained through years of community effort and private funding. Private funding, I echoed. You mean the $45 a month tax you've levied on your neighbors? They pay dues, she said, enunciating each syllable like I was a particularly slow preschooler. And what exactly do these dues cover? Lake cleaning, she said. Algae control. Fish population health. Boat launch repair. Signage. Signage. I raised an eyebrow. Signs indicating where lake access is prohibited. Like right here. She gestured vaguely toward my dock, which, again, is literally attached to my property like a barnacle to a boat. Oh, so this is your sign, I said, kicking lightly at the weathered post where someone had zip-tied a faded plastic placard that read, Private Property, NO Fishing. I hadn't removed it yet because, well, I like to know who's trespassing on my turf. Now I knew. Karen's lips tightened like she'd bitten into a lemon made of shame. Let me get this straight, I continued. You formed an HOA that nobody legally voted for, created rules that have no legal jurisdiction, charged people money under the guise of lake maintenance, and now you're trying to enforce those fake rules on the guy who owns the lake. Karen blinked. You don't own the lake. I sighed. She was really clinging to that belief like it was a flotation device on the Titanic. Karen, I said, using the kind of voice you reserve for children and raccoons caught in your garbage can, my grandfather bought this land in 1962. The property deed includes the lakebed, the water, the mineral rights, and yes, access rights. It's called riparian ownership. I've had this verified by county records, a property lawyer, and a very bored guy named Glenn at the water zoning office. Karen took a half step back. That's not how it works. Water is public. Not when it's entirely within private land and never connected to public navigable waterways. It's not, I said. This isn't Lake Michigan, Karen. It's a glorified puddle with a trout population. She stared at me, eyes narrowing. You're bluffing. I grinned. Wouldn't it be hilarious if I were? That was the moment her confidence started to fracture like a porcelain doll in an earthquake. But instead of folding, Karen doubled down, because of course she did. Anyone can say they own a lake, she said, voice rising slightly. You could be making all of this up. Maybe you're squatting. I've seen that show on HGTV. Oh, you sweet summer child, I said, shaking my head. Do you really think I'd be out here on a Saturday morning, calmly fishing from my dock, if I wasn't 100% legally authorized to do so? Karen opened her mouth, probably to say something about bylaws or community spirit or how I was upsetting the vibes, but I cut her off. Tell you what, I said, suddenly inspired by a very fun idea. Let's make a deal. Her eyes lit up. Karen was a woman who loved deals. Deals meant power. Deals meant control. Except, unfortunately for her, this one was about to snap back like a rubber band. If I can't prove that I own this lake, I said slowly, I'll never fish here again. I'll stay off the water entirely. In fact, I'll hang a sign myself that says, banished by HOA order. Karen's visor visibly perked up. And if you can't prove it, you dissolve the HOA, I said. Return every cent you've collected from your neighbors for lake maintenance. Issue a formal apology, and, just for fun, deliver that apology in writing, signed, notarized, and hand-delivered to every house around the lake. Karen flinched, but not enough to stop her mouth from moving. Fine. And when you fail to prove it, because you will, you agree to remove yourself from this lake permanently. No fishing. No swimming. No floating around pretending to be a property mogul. I offered her my hand. She looked at it like I'd just extended a dead squirrel. Deal, she said, and we shook. It was the limpest handshake in the history of human agreements. I've gotten firmer grips from toddlers. As she fired up her pontoon boat and turned back toward whatever HOA lair she slithered from, I leaned against the dock post and let out a long, satisfied breath. Karen had made two fatal errors. First, she assumed I was bluffing. Second, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I don't just build websites for lawyers and real estate firms. I study property law in my spare time like a nerd studies lore from Lord of the Rings. My hobby is turning Karen Energy TM into courtroom poetry. This wasn't about fishing anymore. This was about legacy. About standing up for the cabin my grandfather built with his hands and a half-empty bottle of bourbon. About the childhood summers the first spent leaping off that dock and catching frogs in the reeds. About not being steamrolled by a glorified clipboard with a visor. Karen had declared war. And unfortunately for her, I'm fluent in passive-aggressive legalese and fueled by righteous pettiness. Most people, when they find out they've picked a fight with the legal owner of an entire lake, quietly retreat to their porch, reevaluate their life choices, and maybe pick up a hobby that doesn't involve clipboard warfare. But Karen? Oh no. Karen was not most people. Karen was the kind of person who would double down on a bluff. Even after the river card revealed she had absolutely nothing but a laminated "No fishing" sign and the audacity of a dictator who couldn't spell jurisdiction. The deal had been struck. The handshake, if you could call her limp fish grip that, had been sealed. And now, the countdown had begun. 7 days. 7 days for me to compile proof of ownership. 7 days before Karen probably started building a metaphorical guillotine out of HOA forms and emotional manipulation. But here's the twist. I wasn't stressed. I was thrilled. Because this wasn't going to be a simple, here's the deed situation. No. Karen needed a full-blown public humiliation, the kind of takedown that would become Pine Lake legend. The kind of story neighbors whisper over barbecue pits for decades, like folklore, but with more passive aggression. And I had every tool in my arsenal ready. Let me paint you a little picture of who she just declared war on. Yes, I'm a web designer by trade, which in Karen's mind probably translates to knows how to use Google and spell check. But what she didn't know was that I also freelance for real estate developers, zoning attorneys, and, oh yes, municipal legal consultants. My computer isn't just for playing Minesweeper. It's a portal into the deepest, dustiest vaults of public records, plat maps, and forgotten legislation. The entire Pine Lake community? I could dig up the architectural blueprints of their homes before they were even built, complete with the city planning commissioner's coffee stains. But that wasn't enough. No, this wasn't just about being right. This was about making a point. A big, loud, perfectly annotated, notarized point. I wasn't just going to prove ownership. I was going to prove that Karen's entire HOA fantasy was a legal house of cards, built on air and held together with ego. The next morning, Sunday, I sat at my kitchen table with two things, a hot mug of coffee and the deed binder my grandfather had stored in a fireproof lockbox behind a loose panel in the fireplace. Grandpa wasn't paranoid. He was just precise. And it turns out, there's a very thin line between those two things when you're a man who once kept receipts from every bag of concrete he ever bought. I flipped through yellowing papers and survey maps, so old they looked like they'd been sketched by a pirate. But there it was, the property line. The lake, outlined in bold. The notations about water rights. The mineral rights. Even the dock usage stipulations. And, beautifully, an addendum added in 1984, confirming grandfathered riparian privileges after a nearby zoning change. Signed. Stamped. Crystal clear. I could have ended the fight right there. I could have marched that binder over to Karen's deck, laid it on her tiki-themed patio table, and said, game over. But where's the fun in that? See, bullies don't just need to be stopped. They need to be educated. They need the kind of lesson that comes with a community audience and a twist ending. So instead, I spent Sunday drafting a plan. First, the legal angle. I sent a message to Rick Martinez, a longtime friend and property attorney with a mild caffeine addiction and a major weakness for poetic justice. Rick had helped me sort through the inheritance paperwork after Grandpa passed, so he knew every inch of the Pine Lake property like the back of his hand. Rick, I typed, got a situation that might require a touch of legal razzle-dazzle. A woman named Karen is trying to enforce a fictional HOA over the lake. I need all cannons locked and loaded. He replied in 5 minutes flat. Jake, I'm already heating up the popcorn. Let's light her clipboard on fire, metaphorically. Or legally. Whichever comes first. Perfect. Next, I called in a favor from my buddy Darren at the county assessor's office. I once helped Darren recover a lost website project when his cat knocked his hard drive into a glass of Diet Coke. In return, I now held an eternal backstage pass to public land records. Jake, my man, Darren said when he picked up. You calling means one thing. Someone stepped on your legal toes. You got it. I need everything you've got on Pine Lake. Deeds. Surveys. Any mention of HOAs, associations, covenants, or community development plans. You got a Karen situation? I got the Karen situation. Say no more. I'm bringing snacks. While Darren dove into the dusty annals of county bureaucracy, I worked on part 3 of the plan, exposure. Because if you really want to dismantle a fake empire, you don't just hit it with facts. You pull back the curtain and let everyone see what was behind it. And in this case, it was a laminated fantasy world run by a woman with a yacht-sized superiority complex. I drafted a simple document, nothing too flashy, just an overview of ownership, a few annotated copies of the deeds, a breakdown of the riparian laws involved, and a little primer on why an HOA that doesn't control the land it governs is about as useful as a traffic cop in a Minecraft server. Then I emailed it to Rick for polishing. His reply? This is beautiful. It's like watching someone build a guillotine out of municipal code. By Wednesday, I had everything. Legal proof, tax records, survey maps, and a secret weapon. An old environmental impact study from 1978 that Darren unearthed from microfilm, confirming Pine Lake's classification as a privately owned, non-navigable water body. Translation, not only did I own it, Karen never had the right to pretend otherwise. But I wasn't ready to unveil it just yet. No, Karen needed to ask for the proof. She needed to come storming in with her flotilla of righteousness, demanding to see my receipts so I could serve them with garnish. And sure enough, right on schedule, Thursday morning at 7:45 a.m., I heard the familiar death rattle of a pontoon boat engine, followed by the unmistakable squawk of a woman who's never been told no, without immediately emailing someone's boss. Karen was back. Only this time, she'd brought backup. 3 pontoon boats flanked hers, each carrying a handful of neighbors. Some with clipboards, others with confused expressions. A few wearing matching Pine Lake HOA shirts, which I can only assume she had made in bulk for moments just like this. And leading the charge, Karen, standing at the bow of her boat like the world's angriest cruise director. "Time's up," she shouted, holding up her clipboard like it was a search warrant. "Oh, Karen, you really should have spent this week reading case law instead of printing matching merch. Because class was in session. And today's lesson? You don't start a war over a lake you don't own." You'd think Karen's flotilla parade of pontoon-piloted passive aggression would have been the climax. 3 boats, 8 neighbors, and more sun visors than a Florida retirement community. But no, that was just the trailer. The feature presentation? That began the moment I walked into the county recorder's office on Monday morning like a man preparing for battle, with coffee in one hand, a flash drive in the other, and a plan in my pocket that would make Sun Tzu proud. I'd taken a personal day, not because I needed rest, because this was personal now. This wasn't about a Saturday morning fishing spot anymore. This was about legacy. My grandfather, Walter Jacobs Sr., didn't pour concrete footings for the dock with his bare hands and a fifth of Jack Daniels, just so Karen Hutchinson could strut around on pontoon patrol like the Queen of Pine Lake. The county recorder's office smelled like dry paper and justice. I walked in and was greeted by Margaret, the real MVP of municipal record keeping. 72 years old, sharp as a tack, and so familiar with property boundaries in this county that developers used to try bribing her with Starbucks gift cards. Didn't work. Margaret drinks diner coffee, black, and she drinks it angrily. "Jake Jacobs," she said with a smirk, eyes peering over her glasses like I was about to request something interesting. "Margaret," I said, matching her smirk. "You busy?" I was, but I'm guessing you're about to fix that. "Oh yeah, got a neighbor trying to HOA me off my own lake." Her eyes lit up. "Oh, I need to hear this." As she walked me to the records vault, I explained the situation. Karen, her clipboard, the made-up dues, the "you can't fish here" demand while I was quite literally sitting on my own dock. Margaret let out a low whistle. "You've got a live one." She tried quoting regulations at me. Laminated ones. Margaret nearly dropped her coffee. "Oh, sweetheart, she's going to hate what I'm about to print." What followed was an absolute data feast. Original deed, check. Water rights, double check. Topographical surveys, zoning plats, and tax rolls dating back to the Nixon administration? Check, check, and glorious check. "This is ironclad," Margaret said, sliding a set of microfiche prints across the desk. Not only do you own the lake and its bottom, but your family's been paying taxes on it for over 60 years. Riparian rights, exclusive water access, even mineral claims under the bedrock. It's the Fort Knox of lake ownership. You think Karen's going to laminate that? Oh, she's going to laminate something. All right. Maybe her apology. Next, I called Rick, my attorney friend with the courtroom charm of Saul Goodman and the brain of a man who once sued a landscaping company for improper hydrangea placement and won. Rick, I said, Karen's trying to enforce a fake HOA over Pine Lake. There was silence on the other end, followed by the sound of something clattering onto a desk. You're kidding. I wish. She's trying to pull an HOA takeover on a privately owned lake. Yep. With dues, rules, signs, the whole HOA starter pack. Jake, he said slowly, this is not just going to be fun. This is going to be biblical. I emailed him the packet Margaret helped me assemble. Within minutes, Rick was calling again, practically vibrating through the phone. This is a slam dunk wrapped in gift paper. Not only is the lake yours, but every home built around it had to acknowledge those property lines in their development permits. Karen's little association has less legal standing than a lemonade stand on federal property. Think we can shut her down? We can do better. We can expose her. There are refund claims here. Fraud implications. If she collected dues under the pretense of lake ownership, that's a civil lawsuit waiting to happen. You could own her pontoon boat by the end of the month. Tempting. But let's keep this neighborly for now. Rick paused. You want me on the call when you drop the documents? Oh, you're going to be front and center. By Wednesday, we were locked and loaded. Not just with deeds, maps, and tax documents, but with the piece de resistance, a 1978 environmental impact report Darren unearthed from the bowels of the county's archive. It was dusty, yellowed, and smelled like despair, but in plain legal language it confirmed that Pine Lake was a privately held, non-navigable body of water, and that the original developers were explicitly barred from claiming any portion of it as communal property. The HOA never existed legally, not even in the fine print. Just a fiction. A fever dream cooked up by a woman who thought that if she printed enough rules, they'd magically become real. Rick was ecstatic. Jake, this isn't just proof. This is a nuke. Karen's been playing Monopoly while you've been building a chessboard with flamethrowers. I spent the evening assembling a public packet. Easy to read, clearly marked, with bold red labels that read things like facts, evidence, and Karen's error number 1. Because this wasn't just about winning. It was about educating. Let me be clear, I didn't hate Karen. Not really. But I despised what she represented. Those people who believe power is something you declare, not something you earn. Who think they can bully their way into owning what was never theirs. Who hold clipboards like their scepters and speak in bylaws as if reciting gospel. And now, she was about to learn a new rule. Don't bring laminated fiction to a legal fact fight. Thursday morning came with an unusual quiet. The birds still chirped, the water still shimmered, and my coffee still tasted like victory in a mug. But the air had that electric charge you get before a thunderstorm. Only this time, the storm wasn't weather. It was a woman named Karen. And she wasn't coming alone. I was back on the dock, feet bare against the sun-warmed planks, sipping from my favorite mug, world's okayest fisherman. When I heard it again, that cursed pontoon motor. Except now, it wasn't just Karen's sputtering chariot of doom. It was an armada. For boats. 4. Karen was leading the fleet like Admiral Entitlement, standing tall at the helm, her clipboard tucked under one arm like a captain's log from the USS Power Trip. Behind her were 3 more pontoons, each carrying 2 or 3 neighbors. I recognized maybe one of them. The others looked like they'd just been guilt-tripped out of their morning yoga. Time's up. Karen barked across the water, her voice slicing through the morning air like a steak knife through jello. Where's your so-called proof? I didn't move. Didn't even flinch. I just sipped my coffee and waved casually, like they were Jehovah's Witnesses arriving at the wrong house. Again, Karen's boat bumped against the dock as she cut the engine, and the rest of her squadron floated in behind her like confused ducklings in a cult. The stage was set. I took my phone out of my hoodie pocket and tapped it. Rick, you there? Loud and clear came the cheerful voice of Rick Martinez, attorney-at-law and destroyer of fraudulent HOAs. "Good morning, everyone." Rick's voice echoed from my speaker, crisp and clear. "Rick Martinez here, property law specialist. Jake asked me to join this conversation today because, well, this is about to get legally fascinating." Karen's face twitched. She hadn't expected me to bring backup, especially not backup with a law degree, an excruciatingly dry wit, and a specialty in real estate law. Her eyes narrowed. "Why is there a lawyer on the phone?" "Because I like my legal slapdowns with a witness," I said. "And this one's going to be educational." "Jake," Karen began, in that tight, condescending tone reserved for people she's about to verbally bludgeon. "We've gathered here." "Oh, are we doing a tribunal?" I interrupted. "Should I get a robe and gavel?" "To demand proof of your claim," she pushed on, ignoring me. "You have until the end of this meeting to present valid documentation that you own Pine Lake." Rick's laughter crackled through the speaker. "You're acting like this is some kind of courtroom drama, Karen. Spoiler alert. Jake doesn't need your permission to prove what he already owns." Karen ignored him. "Big mistake." I held up a neatly labeled folder. "This is a copy of the original deed from 1962, signed and recorded with the county. It includes the full lake bed and water rights. This," I flipped to the next section, "is the environmental impact report from 1978, confirming Pine Lake as a privately owned, non-navigable water body. And these," I fanned out a handful of highlighted documents, "are 60-plus years of tax records, all paid, all listing ownership of the land and the water." The flotilla went silent. You could practically hear the neighbors recalculating how many months of $45 lake dues they'd thrown into the Karen-shaped pit of delusion. Rick stepped in. "Karen, you've been collecting HOA fees under the premise that your group has jurisdiction over the lake. But since Jake owns the lake, and always has, you don't have any authority here. In fact, you've been charging people money for services you can't legally provide." A man on the second pontoon, gray hair, fishing hat, looked like the type who enjoys quietly judging teenagers, spoke up. "Wait, are you saying we've been paying for nothing?" Rick didn't skip a beat. "That's exactly what I'm saying. There is no legal HOA jurisdiction over the lake. No rights to collect fees. No power to enforce access restrictions. You've been misled." Karen's face flushed a shade of red not found in nature. "That's ridiculous. We've had rules for years. Bylaws, meetings, community votes, and none of them are legally binding," Rick replied calmly, "because you don't have control over the lake or its access points. You can't enforce rules over property you don't own. That would be like me trying to fine you for how you decorate your living room." Another neighbor, a woman in workout gear who looked like she'd much rather be in Pilates, muttered, "I thought the dues were voluntary." "They were never presented that way," said fishing hat guy. "Karen said they were mandatory for upkeep." "They are for upkeep," Karen shrieked. "Do you think the lake maintains itself?" Rick chuckled. Yes, it does. It's a natural ecosystem, not a backyard pool." Karen reached for her clipboard like it was a talisman. "This is harassment. I'm calling the police." "Great idea," I said, already dialing. "They'll love this one." 20 minutes later, Officer Martinez, no relation to Rick, though I found the coincidence deeply satisfying, arrived. He stepped onto my dock with a polite nod, scanning the scene like he was walking into a live-action soap opera. "So let me get this straight," he said, flipping open a small notepad. "Ma'am, you're saying this gentleman is trespassing on lake property?" Karen straightened. "Yes, officer. This is HOA-regulated water, and he refuses to comply with posted restrictions." Officer Martinez turned to me. "And you're saying you own the lake?" "Yes, sir," I said, handing him the folder. "And here's the documentation to prove it." He took the papers and started flipping through them. I watched his eyebrows climb with every page. Deeds, maps, water rights, tax records, impact reports, all perfectly labeled, copied, and presented like a courtroom exhibit. After a few long moments, he looked up. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "this all checks out. Mr. Jacobs owns the lake. Full riparian rights. The whole 9 yards. Karen blinked. That can't be right. It is, Officer Martinez said. And if you've been collecting money from residents under the false pretense of managing a property you don't own, well, that could be considered fraud. You could hear a collective gasp from the neighboring boats. The HOA shirts suddenly looked like prison uniforms. I didn't know. Karen sputtered. I thought, I was told. Ma'am, the officer said gently. It's your name on the paperwork. It's your rules on the signs. It's your name listed as president. Fishing hat guy muttered. So we've all just been scammed. I cleared my throat. Technically, yes. Emotionally, oh, you've been Karen. Rick's voice came back through the speaker, positively gleeful. And if you want restitution, I'd recommend organizing a class action. I'd be happy to represent you. Special discount for HOA-related trauma. Karen's shoulders sagged. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. The power drain was almost visible. The clipboard now dangled uselessly in her hands. Her Excalibur turned into a paperweight. And me? I sipped my coffee. Damn, it tasted good. If you've never watched a woman try to will a legal document out of existence using only denial and a deeply furrowed brow, I envy you. But for me, it was Thursday, and I had a front row seat. Karen stood on her boat, gripping her clipboard like it could absorb the contents of the folder Officer Martinez was now holding. Her face had gone from rage red to pale beige and back again in under a minute, like a human mood ring in total system failure. This can't be right, she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of reality. Oh, but it is, Rick said through my speakerphone, his tone dripping with equal parts amusement and legal gravitas. Page 3 is the survey map. Page 7 confirms the riparian rights. Page 12 is the real gem, continuous tax payments on the lake property for over 6 decades. All in the Jacobs family name. The neighbors leaned in. One by one, they began to read. First came confusion, then betrayal, then the dawning horror of realizing they'd been giving money, hundreds of dollars over the years, to a woman who had less legal authority than a mall cop outside her jurisdiction. One of them, a woman in a sun hat 2 sizes too big, spoke softly. We've been paying for what exactly? Karen tried to rally. Lake maintenance. I've personally arranged cleanups, bought signage, scheduled water testing. Scheduled with who? Asked Fishing Hat Guy. The ghost of the EPA? Rick, never one to pass up a good legal metaphor, chimed in again. Karen's been operating a pseudo-HOA. That's like creating a toll booth on someone else's driveway and charging them to park. Officer Martinez, bless him, kept a straight face, but I could see the corners of his mouth twitch. Ignorance of property law, he said, doesn't excuse collecting money under false pretenses. We're potentially talking about fraud here, ma'am. Karen's jaw dropped. I was just trying to help. With what exactly? I asked. Helping my neighbors part with their money? Helping enforce fake rules on a lake you don't even have access rights to. Karen turned to her flotilla like they were her loyal army, only to find an unsettling number of people suddenly refusing to make eye contact. Karen, said one man, tall with mirrored sunglasses and a surprising amount of patience. You said this HOA was legally registered. It is, she stammered. Rick cut in, sharp as a scalpel. No, it's not. There's no official filing with the county. No articles of incorporation. No registered officers. What you've done is form a social club with delusions of grandeur, and you used it to enforce illegal restrictions and collect unauthorized dues. Which, I added helpfully, is going to make for one hell of a neighborhood Facebook post. Karen suddenly snapped. I'll return the money, she shouted. Fine. I'll write everyone a check. And dissolve the fake HOA? I asked. She hesitated, just long enough to make it painful. Rick didn't wait. If you don't dissolve it, Jake has every right to take this to court, and I can assure you, he'll win. The documentation is flawless. A judge would wrap this up faster than you can say riparian rights. Another neighbor chimed in, voice rising. So all those fees we paid, lake maintenance, special assessments, even the 4th of July fireworks fund. Karen cut him off. We enjoyed those fireworks. You bought them with our money. And I organized everything. With what authority? Officer Martinez stepped between the boats. Enough. Look, I'm not here to adjudicate a civil dispute, but I strongly recommend, ma'am, that you take steps to correct this before someone presses formal charges. Karen looked like she'd just been told her yacht had sunk. I want to make this right, she said, her voice suddenly very small. I didn't know. I really didn't. That's funny, I said. Because you knew enough to make rules, collect payments, and tell me I couldn't fish on my own dock. Officer Martinez turned to me. Jake, how would you like to proceed? I took a long breath. I could have pressed charges. I could have called a lawyer, sued for harassment, maybe even gone after punitive damages for attempted extortion. But looking at her now, wilting under the collective disappointment of her neighbors, clipboard hanging by her side like a fallen badge of dishonor, I realized something. She didn't need legal consequences. She was already facing her worst punishment, total, public humiliation. I'll let it go, I said, if three things happen. Karen looked up. Hope flickered behind her eyes. First, I said, you return every dollar you collected. She nodded furiously. Second, you dissolve the HOA immediately and issue a signed letter to every neighbor explaining what happened. Another nod. And third, I smiled, you apologize. In writing, for trying to kick me off the lake my grandfather built a life on. Her face twisted, like I'd asked her to lick asphalt. But she nodded. Crystal clear, she whispered. Officer Martinez tucked his notepad away. Sounds like a resolution to me. Ma'am, I suggest you follow through quickly, and maybe steer clear of clipboard-based leadership roles for a while. As the flotilla dispersed, quiet now, the energy completely drained, I stood alone on the dock and watched Karen's boat putter back toward her house. And let me tell you, there is no sweeter sound than the fading hum of a Karen retreating in silence. The lake returned to its stillness. The birds picked up their songs again. And I, finally, took another sip of coffee and grinned. One laminated empire had just crumbled, and the ripples were only beginning. The thing about empires built on laminated lies is that when they fall fast. No slow fade into obscurity. No dignified retirement. Just a spectacular, clipboard-snapping implosion. Public, messy, and oh so satisfying. By Friday, Pine Lake had turned into a gossip cauldron. Word had spread like wildfire on the neighborhood group chat, which I finally joined just for the popcorn. Karen Gate, as one neighbor dubbed it, had become the topic. I half expected a documentary crew to show up. Karen, meanwhile, was going through the emotional ringer at Mach speed. Grief has 5 stages, but Karen apparently hit all of them before breakfast. Denial was replaced by rage. Rage was replaced by desperate bargaining. What if we just rebranded the HOA? And then came the best part. Acceptance, delivered with the grace of a cat falling off a counter and pretending it meant to. Saturday morning rolled around, and the apology letters landed. Printed on Pine Lake HOA stationery, because of course she still used the damn letterhead. Each envelope was hand-delivered and signed, folded with the precision of someone who really wanted to passive-aggressively pretend this wasn't happening. Rick and I reviewed the draft the night before to ensure it was legally sound, but still left room for the community to feel the shame. The letter read, "To my valued Pine Lake neighbors. It has come to my attention that the Pine Lake Homeowners Association was never formally incorporated or authorized to manage lake-related matters. I sincerely regret any confusion or inconvenience this may have caused. Effective immediately, the HOA will be dissolved. All dues collected for lake maintenance will be refunded in full. Please accept my personal apology for any miscommunications regarding lake access or property boundaries. Sincerely, Karen Hutchinson, former acting president, Pine Lake HOA. Miscommunications. Classic. Still, the checks were real, printed, signed, and already being cashed faster than you can say class action threat. Over $23,000 total, paid back to the people who had unknowingly funded Karen's fantasy government. Fishing hat guy dropped by to return the favor, with beer. "Jake," he said, handing me a cold one and settling into a lawn chair on the dock. "You didn't just beat her. You performed a public service." I said modestly. "I just didn't like being yelled at before coffee." No, he said, shaking his head. You held up a mirror to the whole neighborhood. Karen had us all wrapped around that laminated finger. It's like we woke up from a weird HOA cult. Apparently, once the facade cracked, everything started unraveling. Turns out, Karen's authoritarian streak extended well beyond the lake. She had, over the years, fined a neighbor $50 for inappropriate holiday decor, an inflatable Santa riding a flamingo, attempted to charge event management fees for the neighborhood's 4th of July picnic, hosted in a public park, banned lawn flamingos outright. To this day, no one knows why. She wasn't just a Karen. She was a Karen overlord. And now, her clipboard dictatorship had collapsed. By the next HOA meeting, which was hastily repurposed as a dissolution session, Karen didn't even show. No surprise there. It was like the villains skipping their own trial because even they couldn't spin the narrative anymore. Instead, a surprising thing happened. The neighbors, newly liberated from rule by visor, started talking to me. Me, the guy who, until recently, they thought might be a trespassing loner with a questionable fishing license. They thanked me, brought me pie. One guy even offered to fix the steps leading from my dock to the cabin because anyone who dethroned Karen deserves safe footing. And just like that, a quiet shift happened. Pine Lake, once ruled by the sound of Karen's engine and her clipboard's rustling wrath, was finally chill. I started seeing smiles instead of suspicious glances. People waved more. One of the women, Janice, asked if we could organize a voluntary cleanup day for the shoreline. No dues, no mandates, just neighbors helping neighbors. Voluntary, I said. Now that's a concept. We figured we'd ask you first, she said. You know, since you actually own the lake. God, that felt good. Later that evening, Rick called. So, he said, you want to go after her legally? There's still time. Nah, I replied, watching the sun dip behind the trees. Let her stew in it. Bold, merciful, unexpectedly classy of you. Also, I don't want to deal with court dates. I've got trout to catch. You sure? I'm sure. She's finished. I don't need to put her in a courtroom when she's already living in a self-imposed exile of awkward silences and refund checks. Rick laughed. Poetic. And it was. Karen, the once mighty ruler of Pine Lake, now reduced to a cautionary tale with a stack of canceled checks and a defunct group chat. Justice had been served. Not with fury, but with facts. Not with vengeance, but with vinyl-bound documentation and a quiet refusal to back down. And best of all, my dock was mine again. No interruptions. No pontoon invasions. No laminated nonsense. Just me, my coffee, and the kind of silence that doesn't come from power, but from peace. 2 weeks later, Pine Lake was unrecognizable, in the best way possible. Gone were the fake HOA signs. Gone was the buzzing of Karen's pontoon boat doing her morning patrol, like she was the admiral of neighborhood control. And gone, blessedly, was the high-pitched voice shouting about bylaws and laminated policies. Peace had returned. It was Saturday again. The same kind of morning where this all began. Early sun crawling across the lake, birds flitting through the pines, mist curling over the water like a sleepy cat stretching. I was back on my dock, coffee steaming in my mug, fishing rod in hand, bare feet on wood. Only now, something felt different. Not just better. Lighter. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't just defending my peace. I was owning it. Fully, officially, and indisputably. Karen, to her credit, or perhaps out of pure survival instinct, had followed through. The HOA was gone. Not restructured. Not on hiatus. Dissolved. Officially, legally, and with a trail of notary stamps to prove it. The refunds had landed in everyone's mailboxes with checks, along with that now infamous apology letter. Rick made sure the wording was just vague enough to avoid legal admission of fraud, but just sharp enough to sting every time someone reread it over morning toast. She was done, but the story didn't end there. Oh no, because once Karen fell, the rest of her imaginary fiefdom started to collapse like a badly assembled IKEA shelf. Turns out, she hadn't just tried to rule the lake. She'd been trying to install herself as the unelected queen of town affairs. Her little administrative fees, weren't just for lake maintenance. People started digging, digitally and socially, and what they found was, frankly, Olympic-level grifting. The book club debacle. Karen had been collecting $10 per person for refreshments at the local library events, refreshments that were apparently being bought with monopoly money because not a single cookie ever showed up. The garden plot scheme. The community garden, built on city-owned land, had been subjected to her plot fees and weed fines. One guy apparently paid $75 because a dandelion grew too tall. You can't make this up. The Great Folding Chair fundraiser. She raised $800 from a made-up bake sale for new folding chairs for the community center. No chairs were ever seen. Once people started talking, really talking, Karen's empire of nonsense unraveled at light speed. A few neighbors even filed formal complaints. I heard the city clerk's office opened an investigation, not criminal, but enough to make her pack up and flee before things got very real. And flee she did. Last I heard, Karen sold her house in a quiet, rush sale and moved into a condo on the outskirts of a different town. No lake, no HOA, just four walls and, hopefully, some time to reflect on the fine line between organizer and wannabe dictator. As for me, my neighbors now wave when they paddle past in their canoes. Tom, the fishing hat neighbor, became a regular. He brings a cooler, drops a line, and tells stories about the days before the lake got quiet again. One morning, he turned to me and said, "You know, Jake, you did more than get rid of her. You reminded us this lake isn't just a view, it's a community. And community doesn't need a president. It needs people who listen." Which was ironic, really, because I'd never tried to lead anything. I just wanted to fish in peace. But now, we'd created something better than an HOA. We had respect. Voluntary cleanups, a shared calendar for lake events, a group chat that actually made people laugh instead of panic. No fines, no threats, just neighbors being neighbors. I still get the occasional joke from folks who call me the Lake King. Someone even made a novelty sign and nailed it to the dock. No fishing. Unless you're Jake. It's a weird, wonderful feeling when your quiet resistance becomes legend. But the best part? The serenity stayed. No more interruptions. No more laminated laws. Just trout, trees, and the kind of stillness that feels earned. The cabin, once a relic of my grandfather's stubborn dreams, had become a sanctuary again. A place not just protected, but respected. Every Saturday, I sit on that dock. Same chair, same mug, same line in the water. And every now and then, when the morning mist rolls in and the lake goes silent, I think back to Karen. Not with anger, not even with amusement, just with the deep, satisfied knowledge that somewhere out there, she's probably still trying to tell someone what to do. And this time, no one's listening. Because you can laminate a rule, you can print a policy, but you can't fake ownership. And you damn sure can't tell a Jacobs he can't fish on his own damn lake. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.